Nice to meet you, Miss Lindsay. I'm following you on Twitter for a long time. I follow all the interviews. And here in Brazil, this issue is not a thing till now. No, there are no news in the newspapers, on the television. Nobody do any comments about what's going on. We have some women organizing themselves to fight for our rights, but it's a very silent war till now. And your book for me was like a document about our time, this moment, and there are not a lot of documentation about what we are struggling. And I think it's so important. Thank you so much for this. And I start a book club also. No, we are reading your book now, and then I will talk about a little about my why I'm doing it. I'm an artist, Brazilian artist, and I was canceled in a very like medieval way. Everybody like hunting me internet and making threats and all these fireworks they use it in these situations. I know that each situation is kind of different, and it was one of the most curious things about your book because we can see the pattern, some things that I couldn't expect. Most of women, they are around 40. It for me was a very interesting point because I could never put all the pieces together and see it accurate in that way. It makes a lot of sense because your 40s is when you gain some respect in your field. You have already made big things. I should just say that I admire you so much. I wish to have the superpower to write as you.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Aletta. My name's Jenny, for those of you who are watching who have no idea who I am. I'm a poet and a writer, and I used to be a live literature promoter in Edinburgh before I got hounded out of Edinburgh by my former colleagues and friends.
In Brazil, many people don't follow the debates happening in the UK around gender ideology and feminism. Could you briefly explain what led to the controversy surrounding your name?
In order to answer what happened with me, I suppose it's maybe worth saying that the gender wars, as we call them in the UK, the reason that Britain has become known as Turf Island is because unlike in other countries, the UK actually already had very strong discrimination protection for people who identify as trans. So we already had, legal protections against, people who identify as trans being fired or losing their jobs and all these kind of things. And what happened in 2017, 2018 was activists tried to push for our laws to be changed even further, even though we already had protection. So they wanted to bring in something called self-ID, which means basically any man can just say, I identify as a woman, and be permitted all of the rights of women. And that's what lobby groups have been pushing for. But because feminists in the UK had seen what was happening in other countries that had these laws, that's why our resistance has been so strong and why we've managed to not bring in self-ID legally, though a lot of our arts institutions and culture bodies have brought in self-ID, even though it's not legal in Britain. So I live in Scotland, and Scotland is part of the UK, but it also has its own parliament as well. So there are some areas of law that are different in Scotland than they are in England and Wales. So areas like education, our legal system's different. In Scotland, the SNP government, who are the nationalist government, wanted to bring in self-ID. And they did very successfully. But in the run-up to them passing that law, which was overturned by the UK government, thankfully, the run-up to them bringing in that law, they turned Scotland into this incredibly scary place, basically. My background was in the live literature and poetry. So I'm a poet, and I've written sort of stage plays and things like that too. But the main way that I earned my income was through being a programmer. So I would curate live events for festivals, for book festivals, for example. And I've been watching the progress of these ideas about self-ID come through, this gender identity ideology that says we all have a gender identity, and all of the different language that was starting to come through, things like we've all got a gender identity and it may not match our sex assigned at birth, so trans women are women. And I just instantly, as soon as I heard about this ideology, this weird set of ideas, I knew that it was wrong. But the thing that scared me above all else, because, you know, we're human beings, we all have strange ideas about things sometimes. I can accept that up to an extent. But the thing that really scared me, genuinely frightened me, was the activism. So a lot of the activists were justifying incitement to violence against women who did not hold this set of views. And I reached the point myself in 2019 where I felt really claustrophobic. I felt really hemmed in because everybody around me in the literature world and in the arts was justifying this activism, and I just had to say something. And so I called out the incitements to violence that I was seeing from trans activists. And like you, I then got lots of hell, basically. And I'm now, 5-6 years into it. It's slightly gone down, it's slightly reduced for me, but eventually I wrote a big essay about it in 2020. Thankfully, enough people were watching and said, okay, well, you know, your poetry career is now completely over and your live literature career is over. But I was approached to write Hounded, to write the book off the back of that big essay that I wrote. And so, as you say, the book is split into the different kind of harms that are being experienced by women like yourself, like me. And it is very focused in the UK, but the pattern of harms that are being experienced by women, and it is exactly the same in every single country, that this ideology, which is a global ideology, wherever this ideology gets a foothold, women are being harmed, and they're getting harmed psychologically, they're getting harmed socially, they're getting harmed economically, and they're getting harmed democratically. Because I think it's the case in Brazil that your laws sort of came in before anyone really realized what was happening, whereas in the UK we had a chance to stop them before they really got a root in. You know, it's the same in Spain, it's the same in France, it's the same in New Zealand, Australia has gone mad, Canada is completely insane. I mean, it's in every single country, and it's an exhausting global battle. I think that's probably the sort of the plot of my book, as it were. The point of the book is to appeal to those people, as you say, the people who are not following this or who don't want to think about it, scared of getting involved because they've seen what the activists do to us. It's an appeal to them, really, to get their finger out, to get off the fence, to come and join us and realise that the women who are being hounded are right about this set of ideas. The ideas are doing harm to women, but they're doing harm to the people who believe in the ideas as well. I strongly believe that. So, so that's the point of my book.
I think what was interesting in your speech now, that you said that you never had the peak trans. I have the same experience here. I had my same position and the things radicalized. I felt that I just became like an old-fashioned some way, But all my work as an artist was very like biographical work about the cliche of feminism: menstruation, abortion, domestic labor, women giving birth in prison. I never was really a young artist. I became an artist in my 30s because before I was just working, because I'm a young mother. I have a 20-year-old daughter. Suddenly, it became old-fashioned. How people could like clap for my exhibition in 2019 and suddenly in 2021, it's just like a forbidden issue. It's kind of crazy.
The exact same thing happened to me. My last stage show was called This Script, and it was a poetic memoir journeying through my relationship with feminism, with the Me Too movement, which I wasn't too sure about, with relationships, with sexual violence. And I got brilliant reviews in 2018, 2019. I had standing ovations at sold out theatres.
Yeah.
And then the exact same show, the exact same poems.
Yeah.
I've had a poetry collective that I worked with called Loud Poets, who collaborated with me on my film poems. They have removed my performances from their YouTube channel. I've had exactly the same people who praised me to the heavens refuse to like review Hounded. I've had people who I mentored, who I mentored from open mic level to the National Theatre, just completely ostracize me, remove any mention of me from their CVs. It's like you're sitting back and watching your entire life's work be erased in front of your eyes. And what I've found since I've written Hounded as well is a lot of those people from my old world, that my old arts world, a lot of them have gone very, very quiet.
Yeah.
But the ones who are not quiet, they've started trying to destroy my non-fiction career. Creative Scotland is the arts body of Scotland. They're the ones who decide who gets money in the arts. Yeah. One of their literature officers tried to get my book destocked from a local bookshop. It's crazy. It's really frightening on one level. And on the other level, it's just so pathetic.
I think the most difficult to these people that engage on this ideology is that it's at the same time is sinister and dumb. And yes. So dumb and sinister in the same time. It's a scaring clown.
I mean, in 2019, I was at rock bottom. I mean, I was just devastated. I was so poor, I had to leave Edinburgh, and I now live on the west coast of Scotland in a really small town near where I grew up. So it's so weird. I had to leave my home that I loved, and 2019, 2020 was sort of generally just kind of horrible. But then the humor of it starts to come in, because you're just like, I'm getting cancelled and my life is being turned upside down because I've said women are a definable group of human who are important in life and in law, and women shouldn't be threatened for having meetings to discuss laws that affect them. These are really normal views.
My body of work, as I said before, is very like the cliche of feminism, but I have a very iconic work that's just a mural. I draw a grid in a mural, and there are like an imperative phrase that says, mark an X for each abortion you did. And then the women that came in the gallery, they could put the X for each abortion. Mm-hmm. Abortion is illegal in Brazil. It's still illegal. It was never legal. And then it was a very confrontational work, and there are not many works about abortion before I was talking about it. Because middle class, the elites, the bourgeois, they can afford. The moms, the aunts, the mother of the boyfriend bring them to the expensive clinics. But in my background as a working class, born in a working class neighbor, you have not that access. What made me think that I needed to talk about it, because it really affected my life. I don't think that the child of the elites were affected by it. It took some time to people talk about it in the arts, because arts were very like bourgeois elite. But suddenly I became just the phobic, intolerant, full of prejudice. I think that what you commented about it, the erasure, our careers, it's scary for a human being living these situations, very scary. But also it's very interesting as a social experiment, because you see things that you could live 20 lives and do not see this kind of behavior in the human being, the worst behavior they can have,
I mean, when I read your essay that you wrote in The Critic, I mean, it was just, tears because I was just like, this is exactly how I felt when they were doing this to me. And it's not stopped, you know, it's not, although I've managed to find a new way to write, I'm not writing poetry anymore. I'm not being creative. I'm writing nonfiction, which is a very different kind of thing. And I'm just lucky that I can write nonfiction, and luckily I can write essays. I mean, my first love was poetry. It was performing. It was getting on stages, and I can't do that anymore because I have venues refusing to hire me, and they're all terrified of their own staff. I've been taken off education projects that I used to do, and that's obviously money. And you were saying, you know, it's so interesting, isn't it, that a lot of the people who become hounders, they go after self-made women who are self-taught, who have worked their way up, who have established themselves at the top of the field, coming from nothing. It's
a very good strategy, because if they can silence us, it's a message for everybody. If she's fucked, who are you in this battle? The women are very afraid. They receive messages from all over the country here. That's so sad about the situation about the women in the arts, because if the next generation can't see any women they can stand, they cannot have any parameter. That's sad. Because also it's all in the name of feminism. I wish I could buy a big box of your book, and just go into the houses of people, put in the mailbox. You should read it, bitch. You should read it.
No. And my publisher is a small independent publisher, which is great because, I mean, they publish the other side as well.
Translate for Portuguese, please. Maybe Hounded in Brazil has another component. And then I made a survey. I collected some answers from women. Anyway, I think that's a good document for our time. Yeah. If it's not about Brazilian data, I think it's too important. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I was going to say is one of the reasons I'm so pleased to have published Hounded, because I know from my own experience that when I was trying to explain to like my mother or my brother or whoever who isn't in the arts world, trying to explain to them what was happening to me was so difficult because it's so complicated. And lots of women have said to me, oh, thank God for your book. I've just handed it to my friends and said, this is what's happening to me. And I'm like, yes, good. It's so, I'm so lucky I'm a writer. You know, I'm so lucky that I've been able to write my story and write my way out of this. That so many women don't have that. What's happened to me has happened to so many other women. I'm just lucky that even though I wasn't like famous or anything like that, I did have quite a strong cultural clout, I suppose, in Scotland, because I've been around since I was in my early 20s. So lots of arts journalists were following what was happening to me. So I was quite lucky that I had good contact so I could write about it and things. But so many women don't have that. And trying to explain even to like the closest of friends, like who might even be sympathetic to your views, but trying to say to them what it feels like. I noticed you spoke to Rosie Kay the other day as well, and Rosie's one of the people I check in with the most. She just gets it completely because she's an artist and a creative as well. It's like that sense of loss that you have.
Yeah, it's about community. We gave so much, they took back.
They took away everything. I was making a joke with somebody that you know, I loved Edinburgh. Like I felt like I was in a relationship with Edinburgh. I just loved the city. I was so in love with it. And I felt like when I was leaving, I felt like I was going through a divorce or something. In my last weeks in Edinburgh, you know, you expect to get things like good luck cards or, you know, sorry, you're leaving. And instead I got this big fucking massive open letter written about me, signed by all of the fucking poets that I'd given loads of work. I was like, oh geez, it was the most horrible way to leave Edinburgh. It really was.
Talk a bit about in my essay that I born in the outskirts of Rio, on another side of the city. I just could afford rent in 2019 after my first solo exhibition. COVID came, and when COVID finished, I was already canceled. And the feeling is you are not welcome. You could come here to serve the city, to work in bars, at restaurants, at hotels, at cultural centers as an assistant or in museums, la, la. When I just got my things together, you are not more part of it. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Like the feeling you arrive at the party and the DJ turns the sound off. Yeah.
Totally. Because I mean, I didn't earn a fortune, but I got by. I lived on my own in the centre of Edinburgh, so I was doing okay. Most of my money for the sort of few years up to when I got cancelled had come from my events, whereas the final year before I got hounded, most of it had come from my own stage shows. Yeah. So I'd helped everybody else, I'd established a scene, and then I focused on my own work for 1 year, and that's the year where they came for me. And I felt exactly like that. Do you know, I felt so in 2018, me and my then partner went to Paris, and I've never been to Paris before. We went for a wee holiday, and we went to the Notre Dame Cathedral, and we were only in Paris for 2 days, and we walked around the outside of it. Yeah. And we sort of looked at it, took some photos, and we're like, oh, we'll see it another time. And it burned down the next day. That's how I felt about my fucking career. It was like, I've just seen the beauty. I'm almost inside.
But I think that's the good thing about the conversation with Rosie. Sometimes you want to communicate what you're lost. It's so difficult because as an artist, I had a community. All my relationships were inside the community. I lost my producer, but I lost a friend. I lost my best friend. She totally agreed with me before. Totally
me too.
I just wrote her first curatorial test. I introduced her to my gallerists. I made the life of that bitch. She started to call me like alter for high school. She tried to stay together for a bit in the backstage, but she just started correcting my speech, like, oh, trans woman or cis woman. So like, bitch, what the fuck is happening to you? I know you need to talk things to the mainstream to maintain your career. You don't need to act like this with me. It's like crazy because she agree with me about everything. And after she just became another person, totally disconnected about the past, about all the conversations we had before.
I had exactly the same experience with a former best friend in the sort of theatre world who, up until the moment that I started getting very publicly hounded, so I had 7 months of very quiet hounding, sort of behind the scenes stuff. But then when it exploded on social media, that particular friend started to get quite scared and started saying things to me in private, like, oh, I mean, I'm not too sure what I think about the issue, actually. And I'm like, come on. And she was like, no, I don't know. When I speak to you, it makes sense. But when I speak to that side, they make sense too. I'm like, no, they don't. They literally make no sense. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And this was a woman who'd had children. And I was just like, no, I'm sorry. You have given birth. You know what a woman is. Stop it. Stop being so stupid. Yeah. But what she tried to do is what quite a lot of my former friends tried to do, which was in the summer of 2020, that's when J.K. Rowling started getting hounded really publicly. And so instead of joining in my hounding, what a lot of those women did, because they
could now find the J.K. Rowling Hounded. Yeah. Perfect strategy.
Exactly. So that was their way of distancing from me, but without actually being one of my main hounders. They started hounding J.K. Rowling instead. And I was like, guys, it makes no difference. It makes no difference if you're hounding her or if you're hounding Rosie Kay or if you're hounding Helen Joyce or Kathleen Stock or me. It's the same. You're adding to this cultural atmosphere where women are being erased in life and in law.
I was the witch of the city. It was an event that everybody needs to say things. I had friends erasing photos of me from Instagram pages. I have a friend who even needed to change my name in the agenda of her cell phone because the space she works, if my name shows up in the screen, because my name is not Gabriela, my name is not Camila, my name is an uncommon name. She just changed my name for another name.
So crazy, because the people who are doing these things, it's totally understandable why they're doing them, but also the same time, it makes the situation worse when people do that. Like, for example, only last week I had a conversation with a woman who I've known since I was in my 20s. I'm 43 now. I've worked with her on poetry projects for kids. I was speaking to her on the phone because she can't hire me anymore for this poetry in schools project that I'm really good at. And she was saying to me that she can't hire me anymore because, you know, it's the optics. People will assume that the project shares your views and it's in schools. And I was like, I actually completely understand, to be honest with you. And I don't blame this woman at all for her taking me off the project, but it's about £2,000 worth of work. So there's that. But also she doesn't realize it, and she's not doing it for mean reasons, but she's perpetuating the atmosphere that is meaning that this situation continues. Just so stupid.
The thing is also, nobody want to be in our situation, but in a way, if it's happened with you, you would like that somebody take your side. Make no sense, you just abandon, because in one moment it will go for you.
It will.
The culture sector in UK, much like in Brazil, is often seen as progressive. Why do you think gender identity ideology was so quickly embraced by artists and institutions in Scotland?
I think because gender identity activists ran a brilliant marketing campaign. They made it all about kindness and love and sort of glitter and love is love, and like all these slogans, and it was just an absolutely brilliant marketing campaign. And the arts world is quite susceptible, I think, particularly in an age of social media, to sort of quite banal political sloganeering. But in Scotland, what was very successfully done was trans activism hitched itself to the Scottish independence campaign. So since 2014, because Nicola Sturgeon, who was the First Minister, so the leader of Scotland, because she was determined to look progressive and, you know, youthful and down with the kids and creating a beautiful, inclusive Scotland compared to the horrible people in England, she went hell for leather with gender identity activists. The lobbying that has been done in Scotland has been going on since the 90s. So they've really successfully captured all of the institutions. And in the arts, what was starting to happen, I got worried about this way before I started getting hounded. You know, just inch by inch, these organisations like Scottish Trans and Stonewall and the Equality Network were running training sessions and getting their policies into these institutions. And then a lot of very, very either gullible, incurious, or stupid people went along with it.
I think also is in the time of social media, there are vigilant culture. Your followers, they can be the ones that point to the finger, and everybody copy and paste ideas, discourse to be a good person. It's more performative than never.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the vast majority of my hounders in the arts do not understand this issue. They don't even understand what my views are, but they know that I've got the label TERF, and therefore I must be banished. That's what they know. And they don't understand gender. They don't understand our views. They don't understand the law. They definitely don't understand the law. And also they don't understand women's rights, and they don't give a shit about them, which is really unfortunate.
I was an internet figure for my Hounded, and I was very admired. People followed my career, and then suddenly it happened. I think, and a lot of people thought it was strange, but they didn't take part on it because they say, "Oh, it's internet. It's not real life." People say things like that. But in the same time, what surprised me a lot is to see that a lot of people around me at the time was just envy people. And I couldn't realize, because I could see some pleasure in people after. They were drooling watching my installation. Even on Twitter, I did my searching for my name during the hackathon, and I could see like one girl, she was acting like a fan, and she was always inviting me for her exhibitions, and she was very like la, 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 always trying to take a piece of me. But then she was like talking with another bitch. Oh, you see what's happening? I'm making my popcorn now. I was like, fucking bitch, you were like just begging for attention. Because I was in internet before for a long time, I could see that my haters, they were also my lovers. So
yes.
Very crazy situation, because what they want is attention, or to be part of it in a way that could be good or could be bad. It's very mental, crazy process.
Made me realize just how, I suppose, just how fragile and unreal those friendships actually are. I had the same, a lot of the sort of younger sort of women in their 20s who were trying to set up their own literature events and careers, or they just started working for some festival or other, who used to be in my messages and in my inboxes saying, "Hi Jenny, can I do any work for your organization? And I'm so admiring of you." And all of them are now like hounders and sort of, do you know what it is? There's a certain type of young women in the arts in Scotland, and I'm sure it's the same in Brazil, who are very entitled, very privileged, and used to kind of wheedling their way and getting what they want, and they're very demanding, but they kind of hide behind this persona of being nice and shy and kind and they love houndings. They love it. They love that sense of community and purpose that they get from bringing someone down, from bringing down the woman who's their mother, the woman who's just that bit older than them. It's so transparent. I don't think there's any point in being a writer or an artist or a poet or a theatre maker or anything if you're not going to confront something as interesting, mad, and dangerous as gender identity. I don't think there's any point. If you're not going to engage with this issue, there's no point in being an artist.
That's the point. Do you think artists today are censoring themselves to avoid professional and social backlash?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't just think on this issue in the UK, there's quite a lot of other issues. And I've noticed that actually that in Scotland, as I say, gender identity hitched itself to the sort of calls for Scottish independence, and it also hitched itself to the feminist movement as well, which is just mental. I don't know how that is even coherent. But in other countries, it tends to hitch itself to other things. Like in Australia, gender identities hitched itself to sort of campaigns for Indigenous communities and things like that. And so artists in Australia will get cancelled for being TERFs as well as racists. So it's just...
I was called racist. I was called white feminist.
They'll look for anything, because foundationally, none of us should have been hounded because we're just saying ordinary facts. So they have to embellish, they have to exaggerate, they have to find reasons to justify what they've done. But yeah, artists are definitely self-censoring over this issue. And I think some are just completely avoiding writing about women at all because they worry about what might happen.
One of the major criticisms of gender ideology is that it raises women as a political category. In what ways do you see it happening?
I mean, God, let's count the ways, every possible way that it possibly can. You know, if this is why in my book I go right back to the sort of the core beliefs. So are women adult human females? Are we or are we not? Are we important in life and law on that basis, or are we not? Because it is a binary question. So the ways that it's erased, I mean, the thing is, if you can't even have a definable group who you're advocating for, who have a clear and a firm definition, then feminism ceases to exist.
That's
any progress.
not so difficult to understand. Because of it, I think it's a kind of a cultish mentality, because if nobody can talk with you, cannot be seen with you, everything is like guilt for association. Many feminists, including here in Brazil, argue that the imposition of gender self-identification puts women's rights at risk, particularly regarding sex space. What's your view about it?
Don't understand. I really don't understand how the politicians in Scotland that I look at every day cannot understand that as soon as you include one male in a space, it ceases to be single sex. We've got a case going on at the moment that I've written about for the Spectator magazine. NHS nurse Sandy Peggy, who is, she's brought the case arguing discrimination from NHS Fife. And none of this should be happening.
No.
None of it should be happening. Males who identify as female, I know it sounds a bit mean, but I don't care. Do whatever you want. You can identify as female if you want, but we are female, and you have no idea what that means, and you have no idea what our needs are, and we need you, and we are telling you that we need you not to come in our spaces. That is it. That should be it. It should be the be all and end all. And we don't say these things to be cruel. We say these things because we need to say these things because women's rights depend on them. So
I had like a more crazy situation about Nicola Sturgeon, the speech about the rapist. She had not too much information to say if it was a male or female. People made a meme, Did you see? Female, male, and rapist. This was
it was absolutely astonishing, and she wasn't the only one. Our education minister Jenny Goldruth did exactly the same thing on Question Time. It's like, is the individual male or female? The individual is a rapist. It's just like, oh my God, and the entire audience is like booing her, but she just wouldn't say it. And that's when you know you're dealing with a cult.
If they say about this case, all the castle goes down. The final line of your book, keeping the company of courage, is what stops the harms being permanent. Feels deeply personal. What does this phrase mean to you now, a year after completing the manuscript?
I was so proud of my final line. I was like, how do I end this book? What's the killer last line? And that's what it is, because I think you'll probably agree. I wouldn't wish a hounding on anybody, but I have better friends. I have more trustworthy friends. I have more honest friends now that I've come through. And the women that I have met in this battle, women like Helen Joyce, Julie Bindel, yourself, I'd never have connected with you if I hadn't been
crazy. That's a good part of this fight, because we are connected with the bravest women of our time.
And Millie Hill as well. Millie Hill has been brilliant, and she wrote a piece in her Substack the other day. Women, we socialize ourselves to be a bit sort of like, oh, maybe I've done a good thing. And she was sort of like, now when you get into your sort of like pushing into your 40s, you have to just sort of stand and go, no, I am bloody brave. I have shown courage.
What's beautiful. I just read with like goosebumps, because she was describing her conversation with her daughter. And her daughter was asking her child, I don't know the sex of the child, why people keep sending you some presents, flowers, things. And she's like, because I'm a good person, because I rocked it, I did it all, no? And she's just do it, be good with you, even if the world around is not really. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my goodness, should I go the countryside and buy some chickens, and I don't know. But then on other times I'm very feel strong, because if we were not destroyed by this situation, I think just something we'll need a lot.
One of the things that every single woman has to do, and it's so difficult to do, is not to internalize the views of your hounders, because our hounders don't like us. They hate us. They think we're toxic. And I refuse to internalize the views of people so mediocre and so ridiculous.
I find a good situation just to destroy you, because in a way, in the field, if you are in the same field, you are always showing that you can do things in a better way. I don't know how to articulate this, but
they use it competition.
One guy one time met me in a party, a funny guy. He was like, if I was not myself, I would hate you, because he was like, I'm comfortable with myself, with my work, but if I was not I would hate you.
I hadn't appreciated quite how much professional sort of envy and rivalry that people felt for me, because I was totally ignorant. I was like, oh, I'm just Jenny. I've built a really beautiful scene and that's great. And isn't it nice? Other people do it too now, and that's cool. Somebody pointed out to me, they said, Jenny, people have been pissed off at you for ages because you're self-taught and you didn't go through the university route. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was something to fucking hate me for. I see. So yeah, all of those things are in there too. So it becomes not even about the issue, right? Like these people are using the issue.
Yeah, they appropriate the issue just to destroy. Yeah, and I couldn't see it before. I was very naive. I felt everybody were my friend, actually. I was just a party girl, and every time trying to bring people together with me, with all opportunities that I could see, improving the work of my friends, writing about the work of my friends, introducing people, making connections, because I was a broken girl, but I have a very good network because I'm on the internet since it started, and I'm a very compulsive person. And then I had this network. I was always like, but people, even in music industry, I don't play any instrument, but even in music industry, I was connecting people, producing people, and in arts, my art field is visual art, but also I know people in literature because I work in bookshops for a long time. I'm a good reader. I love literature. And I could connect all these parts. Even if I came from a poor background, I could cross all. I could, in a very easy way, I could go up and down in a very easy way to move around, you know. Yeah, I'm not ashamed. I'm just, and it's one of the things that I think they stole, that I don't feel safe to going. I was always like solo experience. I never was part of a group, even collectives. I never was a single mother. I had my time. Sometimes I had free time, but I always had my responsibility. I studied and worked at the same time. I lived far away, and there was all these components. But then that's it. I could just show up in the place, and I know I will meet some people, but I never too much. Oh, let's go together. It was like I live far away. I just go there. I will meet some people, and then everything works. I think that's I have this social, and they stole this because now I go to the places. I don't go anymore. I just go when I need to go, but then you start to see the eyes on you, or the little chats about you, or even praise people that they try really to kiss you, and it makes me just crazy. One time I did like Matrix, you know, the girl came to me and I was like, oh, are you hugging a Nazi person? And she made the face like this. Oh, I never did anything, la la la. And I said, I have the prints.
I had a really strange thing like that happen to me last year, actually, before the book came out. Somebody, this artist and writer, had signed the open letter against me. Came up to me at an event. She hadn't just signed the open letter, she'd had a real go at me on my Facebook page as well. And I was like, she came up to me when I was speaking to somebody at this event at the Scottish Parliament, actually, and she was like, oh, hi, Jenny, I'm not sure if you remember me. I'm Rose. And she made me doubt myself so much that I was like, wait, I did have to block her on Twitter, didn't I? And so when I went home, I checked and I was like, I checked. It was like, I had the screenshot. But how strange. I don't know what that behavior was about. Did she think that I wouldn't remember the people who've abused me? It was so fucked up.
Yeah, I had a moment like this. I was like, when I refused to hug somebody, it became a scene because there was more people watching. And then she said, no, I didn't made anything. And then I thought that I was crazy. And I was like, okay, now I can't be in society anymore because I'm paranoid and I'm seeing it everywhere. My hounders everywhere. And then I went to the bathroom. I had like a collapse, nervous something. And then because of a friend was following me, and she said, I remember her. And then I went home, I checked all my prints, and I sent her the print. And she's like, oh, I didn't remember, saying that she couldn't remember. I was like, fuck, check your...
Well, I did have somebody else, an online magazine editor, actually, deny that he was part of my hounding, because I think to him what he did was so small that it didn't matter. But to me, it's the layering of all of these things. So one person might just like a tweet, one person might sign an open letter, one person might do what this online magazine guy did, which was remove an article he'd written in support of me from his own website at the demand of some of my hounders. To me, that was part of my hounding. He doesn't view that as part of my hounding, but I do. So I think some of them don't realize the effect they've had, because it's the layering of everything upon everything upon everything. And it's never the only thing you're going through. When I started getting hounded, so over the course of the first year of me getting hounded, I went through a fucking massive breakup and moving across the country. So like I was going through all the other things as well. And it's all of that. I think maybe some of them don't realize like what they've been part of.
In Brazil, actually, there are very, very interesting things about my hounded, because I had a friend that she was living in Berlin at the time, and she was sending me a message because we studied together in, you know, as young as teenagers. And she's not from the art scene. Actually, she's a designer, but she's working and then she lives in Berlin, and she sent me a message like, all the bourgeois kids that lives here, Brazilian kids from Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, living in Berlin, they are all engaged in your Hounded. They were like far away, living in another city, the dream European. They have like a passports, double passport sometimes, and they were engaging my Hounded. One friend of mine, she said, there are people talking shit about you in France, in Berlin, Portugal, in New York. I was like, oh, I'm fucking famous. You know?
Oh my God. When my hounding was just confined to the poetry world, and people would get in touch with me and say, oh yeah, my English poet friend is saying bad things about you. And I did try to put them right. And I'd go, why are English poets talking about me? And like, I was the big fish in a very small pond in Scotland, but my hounding went all around the fucking world. It was mental.
The one other curiosity is just men invite me for projects now. That's a good curiosity, because they are not being hounded. They are not affected them in a way. They are not even think that they could be prejudiced in a way because I'm in the project, because nobody's going for controlling their mind so much. Sometimes I think men are more like free to think about all this, because women, they are just like, oh my gosh, I need to pay my credit card in the finish of the month. I don't want to see anything more. They are acting like horses, just going forward. And that's sad about my scene, because a lot of women that I admire, that became my friends, but I just think they are a bunch of cowards.
there are some people who I have no bad feelings towards, but I have downgraded them from friends to acquaintances, because I just think, I've never felt like this about an issue before. So I could have friends who are conservatives, friends who are liberal, friends who are left-wing, friends who are right-wing, friends of all religions, all of them. But with this one thing, it's not a difference of opinion, you know, it's a difference of worldview, where one worldview is our worldview, which is that women are definable and real and important. Other worldview is a world where any man is a woman if he wants to be. Women's rights are destroyed. Young children are being transitioned. Teenagers are being encouraged to think of themselves as human beings in a way that I think is fundamentally dangerous, and where shitloads of people are getting harmed. So if you're going to go along with that world, I can't be your friend, I'm afraid, you know.
The core of the thing for me is like, women are human beings. You cannot make a woman from a man. This idea to think that a woman is an incomplete human being, because if you cut something, you can make a woman. So creationist. I'm curious to get the point you girls are in the UK.
Yeah.
Because they think they can avoid this issue, but it's impossible. Sorry. It will become for everybody. You need to think more about this. You cannot avoid it.
And I will say as well, Aletta, I don't know if it's a comfort to you at the point where Brazil is just now. When this issue does start to shift, it does kind of go very, very quickly. And I must say, I will never, ever regret having spoken out about it, because women like us are going to be viewed as the people who were trying to make sure horrible harms didn't happen, and other people who've stayed silent are going to have to justify why they've done that. I'm just so glad I'm one of the people who spoke out. I'd be horrified with myself had I not, but also I'd be really embarrassed.
Describe how you had to accept that your old career was never coming back. How do you rebuild life when you've been made professionally untouchable?
Really difficult. I was in such a niche area of the arts. I mean, live poetry is not like the most popular art form or anything, but I had created a career out of it, but that career was very precarious, and it was, most of my income didn't directly come from just my poetry. It was through projects and whatever. I mean, I am just incredibly lucky that I can write prose. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning now, is writing prose and writing essays, and being determined for them not to shut me up. And actually, I imagine some people in my old life really wish they'd just left me alone to write poems, because my reach is so much bigger now that I write nonfiction. Idiots. But I've got a very strong moral compass and a set of principles that I want to live my life by. I'm not religious, but I believe in truth and the importance of trying not to do harm to people. I don't know if you've read Harry Potter, but in The Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius Black, who had been in the Azkaban, he manages to escape, and you know, he's asked near the end of the book by Hermione, but how did you manage to survive the Dementors, because they guard the prison and Dementors suck your soul out and you're left as a husk. A hounding does that too. A hounding can leave you a husk of the human condition. But what Sirius says is, well, Dementors suck out happy thoughts from you. I know that I'm innocent, and that isn't a happy thought, so they couldn't take it from me. And that's a very roundabout way of saying that the thing that keeps me going, I do know that we are right about this issue. And even when I'm not proud of, perhaps when I get really angry at my hounders or whatever, I know that I'm right about the issue. I know that it is unjust. I know that it is unjust what's happened to you, what's happened to Rosie Kay, what's happened to Maya Forstater, what's happened to Rachel Rooney, what's happened to the hundreds of women whose names we never hear. I know that it's unjust, and I've got a really strong sense of justice, And that's how you rebuild your career as an artist, I would say. The houndings over this in the arts are the most vicious because they go for your reasons for getting out of bed in the morning, and you've just got to hold tight to the fact that that is unjust. Proper artists do not do this to other artists.
I get very depressed. But my first year, second year was more heavy. And then after the third year, I just resurrect. Second year, I made a performance of my funeral. I pulled my studio for like black earth and worms. My first year after cancellation, I tried so hard applications for a resident outside of the country because I couldn't walk on the street. I received so many death threats. You need just a crazy person that drink too much or something, sad things like will cut my tooth, take out my teeth. A lot of things about my mouth and vagina also. They put my address on Twitter, asking for videotape me be punched. It was very scary moment. I couldn't look at the eyes because I couldn't know if I should smile or not. I was trying to escape. Yeah. I know cases of women canceled in Brazil, but my case, I'm still living in the city. I was canceled. Each corner is a trigger. I see the old friends, the old people that need to have a very strong mind. That's not a thing I have. To not get modulated also by all these treatments.
Yeah, I find it difficult going back to Edinburgh when I go to visit, and it's so there's ghosts on every corner, and just really good old memories. But then I'll see somebody, or it's a horrible feeling, and it's really a hell of a resilience to do what you've done, which is to stay in the place that it's happened.
I could come back to my neighborhood that has gangs fighting each other, drug cartels. That's not a place that I want to come back because I have a daughter. Yeah. Also, opportunities in the city, because when I live it there. Sometimes to get a job in downtown, I need to pretend that I live in another neighborhood, because they will not hire you if you live so far away. They will think that you will get late, you have problems. I need to find another address. Difficult. You cannot really enjoy the youth so far away and all these security problems. Both of us have experienced how cancellations don't just affect the individual, but extend to anyone who associates with us. In my case, even people who simply followed me on Instagram were harassed. Did you find most insidious about the way cancel culture operates?
Yeah, I think of the levels of guilt by association are really frightening. And I used to torture myself back in 2020 and look at, use one of those sort of who unfollowed me apps, and I'd see it. And it would, sure enough, it was like a bat signal had gone up somewhere. And about 50 people from one particular place would all have unfollowed me at exactly the same time. And I no longer look at such things. But at the time, you're kind of torturing yourself. But the levels of guilt by association, the fact that people don't seem to understand how free speech works. I would never have expected any of the poets and writers that I used to hire to agree with my politics on the condition of hiring them. That's so mad. Lack of respect for free speech, and the people will go after your friends or your family, I think is just so disturbing. And again, shows that we're dealing with a cult.
In the two main museums, Modern Art Museum in Rio and Modern Museum in São Paulo, now there are two self-identified trans women that they both threatened me. One personally, and another said that I should be decapitated. You identify as a woman, but suddenly you identify as a Taliban. No, you can identify as a woman, but also a Taliban guy, because it's not a simple threat. It's
it's awful, and that's somebody with power in your industry
Yeah, in the arts, the gay guys, they are in the power, no? And now they are protecting also the guys that are identifying as something else.
Gareth Roberts is a gay writer in the UK. He's written a brilliant book called Gay Shame, which is kind of explaining why gay men seem to really, well, a lot of gay men seem to have a real affinity with trans women or trans-identified males, but it's really, really fascinating. But a lot of the things he was talking about, because I'm a woman, I'd never thought about the sort of differences between male and female sexuality as well. And so, yeah, that's a brilliant book.
Just one last one. You write that the brain processes social ostracization like physical pain. I found that comparison disturbingly accurate. What was your darkest moment this process, and how did you get through it?
I remember getting asked what my point was on a podcast here, and I found it such a difficult thing to answer. But I think, actually, to be honest with you, there were two worst times. The first was in late 2019 when my hounding was quite quiet. It was people behind the scenes writing to my publisher, friends messaging me saying, oh, such and such has said that you're a TERF, but it was all very quiet. Like I still had lost all of my work, but I was starting to lose clients and was starting to lose friends. And that was the worst point, because I was still in Edinburgh and I could not work out what to do. Life and making the decision to leave Edinburgh was a great decision, because it felt like I was trying to do something, but because I'd been following what happened to women who get the label TERF, I knew exactly what was coming for me. I knew there was no way out of this for me but through it. When it all exploded in early 2020, it was appalling and really hard to get used to, but there was also a sense of relief, because I could point people to things now and say, look what these people are doing. This is unhinged, which was awful, because I didn't have all my feminist contacts back then either. All of the people like Maya and Helen and Kathleen Stock or Julie Bindel, I didn't know any of them. I was very isolated. And then the other worst moment, I have to say, was in 2022 when my cat died. And the reason that was appalling wasn't just because my cat died. It was because she was the last bit of my old life. She was the last link to my old life. And it was like almost, I don't know. I'll probably end up crying about that. But
it can trigger. But I want to thank you so much. I think it's one of the most important documents of our history time, really what I think about. Susan Brown Miller, the book about rape, it was one of the most important documents for the 20th century, because it helped to criminalize the rape, marital rape. It was. She wrote the book, and the book was a very strong document of the time. I think it's one of the biggest things now for us, and I think it's the beginning of the fight, because before we had no it's like a compilation of all these, and it's so important. Thank you so much. You really inspire me, and I have like a club now. We are about 20 people reading your book, and you give some kind of the feeling of sanity.
Yes, absolutely.
Because even we feel that we are not crazy, sometimes it's so difficult to explain to others around us what we are seeing. And thank you a lot.
It's the silver lining of this mad fight. We get to meet awesome women and awesome cats. So.
That's it. I will wait for the day I can give you a hug, and
need to get you to the UK at some point.